The screen blinked to life with a high-pitched whine. Across 10,000 star systems, from slums on scorched moons to golden towers of highborn alien elites, the feed stabilized into view. The symbol of the Empire, a burning star impaled on a black spike, pulsed red, then vanished. He was already there, shackled, bleeding. Lieutenant Commander Jack Rains knelt on a rusted execution platform, wrists chained to the floor, blood trailing down from a swollen lip. His uniform was shredded, the battered remnants of his Navy SEAL designation barely legible on his shoulder. A dozen alien soldiers surrounded him, insectoid and plated in glistening black armor. One held a ceremonial blade, curved like a crescent moon. Another aimed a sleek plasma rifle at his head. The crowd behind them was massive, rows of Empire citizens in perfect formation, thousands deep, silent and cold as frost. Hovercams circled like vultures, streaming every detail in high resolution. It wasn't justice. It wasn't even punishment. It was a spectacle. A voice, sharp and synthetic, rang out. This human waged war against the sovereign dominion of the Vekari ascendancy. He trespassed on sacred military ground. He assassinated noble officers. He inspired resistance. And above all, he refused surrender. Rains lifted his head, one eye swollen shut, the other defiant. "I did more than that," he said, voice ragged but unflinching. "I survived." There was a ripple in the crowd. A pause. The Empire never showed weakness, yet the translator bots stuttered a moment before correcting the tone. The executioner, a Vekari commander with ceremonial tattoos carved into his carapace, strode forward. "Human," he growled. "Your last words?" Rain spat blood. "You think killing me wins you peace?" The blade hovered inches from his neck. He smiled. "I was just the match." Then the screen cut to black. A beat of silence. Then a red message flared across the broadcast in a dead language long thought extinct by the Empire. "We're coming." The signal hijack lasted 4 seconds before Empire technicians crushed it. But it was too late. The silence that followed was unlike any silence before. 17 light-years away, in the void shadow of an asteroid belt, a ship blinked into existence. No signature, no authorization ping. Just mass where there hadn't been before. It was shaped like a knife. Matte black, heatless, noiseless, forged for death. Inside, 6 soldiers crouched in darkness. Their armor was mismatched. Bits of Earth-shattered military, scavenged Vekari tech, field repairs stitched together with purpose. Their faces were painted with ash and war ink. They didn't speak. They'd done enough of that. They'd watched the broadcast. Their mission was never revenge. This was retribution. Chief Warrant Officer Elias Dorn checked his HUD. The timer had started the moment Rain's signal cut. 20 minutes. That was all they'd need. The drop pod shuddered as it angled for descent. "Ghost Vipers," Dorn whispered. "Masks on." The helmets sealed with a hiss. 20 years ago, Dorn had seen what the Empire did to his colony. Children burned alive, language erased, ancestors' graves scattered across slag. He didn't cry then. He hadn't cried since. But when Jack Rains, his brother in every way that mattered, lifted his head on that broadcast, when he smiled through blood and broken ribs, Dorn's heart broke and hardened at once. Now was time. Time for them to understand who they'd killed. Inside the Empire's core broadcast station on planet Virex Prime, engineers scrambled to restore full control. Sirens wailed. Dozens of Vekari scrambled across control surfaces, data chits flying, antenna arrays recalibrated. "No trace on the hijack origin," barked a technician. "It wasn't routed through standard channels. No planetary bounce. It's like it came from nowhere." The overseer stared at the bloodied execution replay looping on the screen. That human signal. How did it override a Class 5 encryption? No answer. Just wide eyes. Then the alarm stopped. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then the floor erupted. A concussive blast tore through the lower levels. The room filled with smoke, screams, and gunfire. Short, surgical bursts that cut through armor like paper. The screen blinked. Once. Twice. Then froze on the image of Jack Rain's face. As the cloud cleared, a figure emerged, silent, dark, and relentless. Behind him, 5 others. They moved like predators. Before the overseer could reach for the alarm, a throwing knife buried itself in his throat. The feed went live again, only now it belonged to them. In orbit above Virex Prime, the Imperial High Command gathered around a tactical projection, their gleaming war room built in perfect symmetry. 36 admirals, marshals, and strategists, all Vekari, all confident this was a temporary breach. This is nothing more than a local insurgency. One hissed. No fleet movement, no planetary warships responding. They struck a comms tower. A single act of desperation. Then the feed shifted again. This time, the signal was stronger, clearer. A human face filled the screen, helmet off. Elias Dorn. His eyes black with war paint. His jaw carved from rage. "You don't know us," he said calmly. "You think you've beaten us because you burned our cities. You think victory is about banners and broadcasts." He leaned in. "You think killing a SEAL ends the war." He looked down for a moment, breathed, then stared dead into the lens. "You executed my brother. And now, we execute your empire." The screen went black. Across the galaxy, old rebellions sparked to life. In prison camps on Karga, 9 humans who had survived decades of servitude rose and tore through their guards. On captured mining colonies, dormant AIs programmed by Earth decades ago reawakened from silent subroutines, hijacking power grids, shattering atmospheric stabilizers. Rains was the fuse. Dorn was the fire. And now the galaxy watched the first embers ignite. Back in the burning comms tower, the Ghost Vipers moved like smoke. Every room cleared with precision. Every enemy met with unflinching violence. No wasted bullets. No mercy. They weren't here to win. They were here to end. Dorn knelt beside a fallen Vekari officer. The creature's mandibles clicked in panic, blood pulsing from a severed limb. Dorn stared. "This is for Jack," he whispered. Then silence. At the edge of the Empire's known space, a human scout ship, long hidden in the static fields of the Helios Fringe, received the final kill code. The captain, an old Marine with one eye and no patience, stood tall. He keyed the terminal. "Execute Protocol 13. The stars themselves shivered. And in those last quiet seconds before all hell broke loose, as the Ghost Vipers set charges on the Empire's central data vault and readied for extraction, a single sound echoed across every Vekari-controlled channel. A heartbeat. Human. Loud. Slow. Then a voice. Recorded. "Rains, you killed one of us. Now all of us are awake." The vault doors groaned, each inch of movement accompanied by the screech of overloaded servos. A wash of stale air escaped as the Ghost Vipers breached the Empire's central data core. Dorn swept inside first, rifle raised, his motion crisp, predatory. The others followed in a tight wedge formation. Rika, coils of detonation cord slung over her shoulder. Cass, 2 knives always in hand. Lang, the sniper who never missed. Tomas, heavy weapons with a soul quiet as stone. And Saint, the tech priest with scars burned across his scalp in binary script. The room was circular, walls lined with shimmering data spires. Living crystal, each node pulsing with the lifeblood of the Empire's intelligence infrastructure. Every order, movement, and secret whispered across systems was stored here, and with the right command, they would all be erased, or worse, rewritten. Saint knelt at the console. "Encrypted through a neural relay, tied to a living controller," he muttered. "We need biometric keys. Vekari only." Dorn didn't hesitate. He grabbed a dying officer by the collar, dragging him into the core like trash. The Valkyrie struggled weakly, its mandibles twitching. "Make it work," Dorn ordered. Saint placed the creature's clawed hand on the interface, and the system flared to life. The data walls rippled with motion, spirals of light reorganizing, systems unraveling before human eyes. Dorn stepped back, rifle still aimed at the thing's chest. Saint worked fast. 10 minutes before the system isolates our incursion, he said, fingers flying across keys. I can rewrite the Imperial security lattice, turn every planetary defense into a blind machine. Do it, Dorn said. Then burn it. The Valkyrie officer wheezed. Why, it croaked. You'll doom millions, even yours. Dorn's voice was ice. You made Jack kneel. Outside, the tower shook again, shock waves from the orbital bombardment the Empire had triggered in a blind panic. Their own ships, confused by scrambled targeting systems, had begun firing on friendly installations. Civilians screamed through comms. Entire city sectors blinked into flame, and it was only just beginning. In the upper atmosphere, the orbiting command station spiraled out of control. Its thrusters sputtered as emergency overrides failed, one after another, like dominoes in a death cascade. Aboard, General Arvin Keithel slammed his clawed hand against the command table. We were not prepared for this level of insurgency, one of his aides stammered. Their units are too coordinated. Their tech is. It's not tech, Keithel snarled. It's will. They had expected guerrillas, broken rebels, scattered cells clinging to some misplaced hope. Not this. Not humans turning their own technology against them. Not death squads bred in silence and dispatched with surgical precision. Not the systematic unweaving of every thread the Empire had woven for centuries. The signal's been corrupted, another aide whispered. They've taken the tower. Keithel turned slowly. How long ago? 8 minutes. The general's face darkened. He'd been among those who watched Rains die, watched him bleed, kneel, and speak defiance through broken teeth. He remembered the chill in his limbs when the signal was hijacked, and now it all made sense. Rains wasn't a warning, Keithel muttered. He was the flare. In the field below, chaos had turned to something more insidious, paranoia. The Valkyrie High Praetorian Guard, once regarded as unshakable, now operated in frantic squads, each soldier glancing over their shoulder with twitching antennae. Ghost Vipers could be anywhere. They struck fast and disappeared faster. A body missing its head here. A supply depot rigged to explode there. They had no emblem, no flag, no chant, just whispers and fear. In a small village outside the city's edge, Dorn and his team regrouped in the ruins of a burnt-out chapel. The stone walls bore signs of old earth prayers, etched in forgotten dialects, symbols worn smooth by war and time. Rika paced by the shattered altar, checking detonators. Cass stood watch, blades coated in alien ichor. Lang worked on mapping the last exit route, fingers tracing possible lines of exfil on a salvage holomap. Saint finished transmitting the final virus. It's done, he said. The lattice is corrupt. The Empire will turn on itself within the hour. Valkyrie loyalist fleets have already engaged each other in disputed sectors. Tomas didn't speak. He just handed Dorn a pack of C4. There was no joy in their eyes. No triumph. Just precision. Dorn looked up, stared through the open ceiling at the stars smeared across the night sky like oil on water. Jack was up there somewhere, in the void now. Gone. But this was his will carried forward. I want their archive torched, Dorn said. I want the ground here to remember what they did. Cass nodded. No survivors. No mercy, Dorn replied. They taught us that. Saint activated the timer on the core bomb. 10 minutes, non-reversible. The data tower would collapse inwards, detonating a warhead deep beneath the crust. It would take the Empire's most secure network offline permanently and send a very loud, very clear message. The Ghost Vipers moved out, quiet shadows in the dark. From orbit, the explosion was a sunrise. The tower vanished in a plume of red and gold. Debris punched into the stratosphere. Shockwaves racing across the continent like the footsteps of gods. Thousands of nodes across the Empire blinked out. Some screamed. Most just died. On the bridge of the Empire's flagship, the Empress herself stood, surrounded by holograms sputtering with static. She hadn't spoken since the detonation. Behind her, ministers whispered. Generals stammered. "They're not just insurgents," one said, voice trembling. "They're an extinction event." The Empress turned, robes trailing behind her like liquid shadow. "No," she said, voice low. "They are a reckoning." She raised one long, taloned hand, and for the first time in 500 years, ordered the full mobilization of the Imperial Obsidian Legion. Planet killers. Orbital colors. The black weapons. Unleashed not to conquer, but to survive. Back on the surface, deep within the ruins, Dorn and his team watched the sky ignite. Lang checked his pulse beacon. "We've got 4 minutes until extraction window closes." Gunships tracking a storm coming in hard. Tomas slung his cannon over his shoulder, face unreadable behind a blood-stained visor. "We lose comms. We miss the bird." Cass turned to Dorn. "We going home?" Dorn's voice was quiet. "No, we're going to the next tower." Saint looked up from his cracked HUD. "You're serious?" "They executed Reigns to break us," Dorn said, stepping into the light, bleeding through the ruins. "Instead, they exposed themselves." He turned, locked eyes with each of them. "We're not finished. This was just the opening act." Then the ghost vipers disappeared into the burning horizon, leaving behind only rubble, fire, and a world beginning to awaken. Smoke coiled through the scorched remains of the city, heat distorting the skyline in jagged, warping pulses. Beneath the cratered ground, in the subtransport tubes repurposed for insurgent use, the ghost vipers moved like phantoms. Their exfil window had closed hours ago. A storm front of electromagnetic interference had grounded every allied craft on the continent. They weren't retreating. They were advancing deeper. The second lattice tower stood 30 clicks east, shielded by overlapping defense nets, rapid deployment artillery, and the Imperial Obsidian Legion, just arrived from orbit and already raising suspected insurgent zones. Saint pulled back the metal panel blocking the old utility tunnel. Readings show 4 distinct AI clusters managing the exterior defense field. We fry 2, and the third tries to reroute before the fourth overloads. "Fail-safe window," Dorn asked. 6 seconds. "If we miss it, the net resets and the entire compound gets flooded with anti-personnel gas." Cass sheathed one blade, knelt beside him. "That's an ugly way to go." "Then we don't miss," Dorn said, tapping her shoulder. Rika flicked open a detonator menu on her forearm rig. "I've got enough Semtex to make that whole command grid forget its name. Give me the vector, and I'll crawl through their teeth." Lang passed a rifle to Tomas, who accepted it silently. "The Legion's deploying subaudible sweeps," Lang said. "Ultrasonic patterns meant to destabilize human neurochemistry. You start hearing phantom voices, shoot the emitter. If I go down, don't come back for me." Tomas didn't blink. "You won't go down." Dorn grinned without humor. "Let's bring hell to their doorstep." In the tower's upper levels, General Keithel surveyed the security feeds. Every display showed bodies. Valkyrie troops cut down, corridors breached, data uplinks melted by targeted electromagnetic pulses. There were no direct camera shots of the insurgents, just their aftermath. Smoke, blood, and the eerie silence that always followed. The ghost vipers were not human in the way Keithel understood. They didn't charge lines or shout slogans. They consumed systems like cancer. They erased presence, denied pattern. He had studied insurgencies across a dozen worlds, but nothing like this. "Seal all lower levels," he ordered. "I want the tower's power rerouted to interior defense only." Turn off every exterior broadcast channel. A junior officer hesitated. We'll go dark across 6 city sectors. They're watching us through our own eyes, Keithel snapped. Turn it off, or I'll do it myself. The officer complied. In the dark, Keithel leaned over the console and whispered to himself. This ends now. It didn't. Rika breached the compound's southwest wall under cover of a dead shuttle strike. The fireball drew every turret's attention. She dropped low and ran in, her silhouette flickering like a ghost in the aftershock. Dorn, Saint, and Cass came in from the North Service corridor. Lang remained outside, setting up his perch in a collapsed observation tower 3 clicks away. He didn't need direct line of sight anymore. Just data tags. Saint tossed a drone into the corridor. It zipped past scanning lasers and folded into the junction like a wasp. Map's clear. There's an unguarded vent that bypasses their thermal sensors. Whoever built this was lazy. Cass chuckled. Lazy Empire. Aggressive collapse. The trio slipped in. Inside, the air was laced with machine-clean sterility and just a hint of ozone. Footsteps echoed off the walls. They passed stacked crates of suppressor rounds, biowarfare drones, and caged prisoners, some human, most not. They didn't stop. Dorn marked each crate with thermal tags. They would burn on the way out. On the tower's 6th floor, Tomas tore through the fire door using a portable thermic blade. On the other side, Vekari troops were already waiting, armored giants with living metal spears and lightning repeaters. He didn't hesitate. The cannon barked, shredded the closest 2, then jammed. Tomas tossed it, drew his fallback weapon, a shotgun with Infernium rounds, and kept moving. One trooper screamed as molten buckshot turned his carapace into slag. Another lunged. Tomas caught the spear in his gut, growled, twisted, and snapped it in half with his bare hands. He didn't stop until every enemy was a smear on the floor. His armor was punctured. He bled from the mouth. He kept walking. Behind him, the plasma mines he'd planted ticked down to 0 and erased the hallway. Cass reached the inner sanctum first. The central AI, what the Vekari called the voice of command, sat on a crystalline throne, its limbs too long, face stretched with serene cruelty. It had no mouth, but it spoke. You fight inevitability. We are the culmination of order. You are entropy given form. Cass didn't argue. She threw her knife through its left eye and tackled the drone guards before they could react. Saint slid in, hacked the fail-safes, and flooded the system with every virus they'd ever written. Dorn followed, rifle sweeping. I want a full blackout, he said. Global. I want every Vekari base offline. No eyes. No ears. Saint's fingers blurred. 1 minute. Then they're blind. Lang adjusted his scope. A transport ship roared overhead. Imperial class, full of fresh obsidian reinforcements. His HUD blinked, signaling movement across the far ridge. An armored crawler was rolling toward the tower, flanked by 20 legionnaires. These were the elite, genetically enhanced Vekari bred for war. Their armor was kinetic dispersal reactive. Their minds were firewalled against psychic attack. Lang exhaled, measured wind, distance, temperature. He pulled the trigger. The crawler's main sensor array exploded in a flash of blue flame. Then he shot again, and again. Each bullet found a weak point. Each body hit the ground before their comrades realized they were being hunted. By the time the crawler reached the tower, it was empty. Just twisted metal and shattered hope. Lang stood up, dropped the rifle, and faded into the smoke. Back inside, alarms howled in a dozen languages. Saint smiled grimly. We did it. Full network cascade. They can't talk to each other anymore. Then they can't coordinate, Dorn said. Rika's voice came through the comms. Compound's rigged. On your go. Not yet, Dorn replied. He turned to the shattered AI core. This is for Jack. He placed a final charge. High yield, no containment. Then he lifted a photo from his pocket. Rains, smiling, mud on his face during a training op in Tunisia. Dorn tucked it inside the core, next to the detonator. They ran. The explosion bloomed behind them, like an artificial sun, erasing everything inside. Across the Empire, command stations went silent. Warships began turning on each other, confused by corrupted IFF tags. Entire colonies declared independence in the chaos. Rebel cells once fractured began to reorganize under the legend of the fallen seal and the ghosts who answered his death. Back on Earth, screens lit up with broadcasts from across the galaxy. Civilians watched as Imperial worlds fell one after another, some peacefully, others in flame. It had been 20 minutes. Exactly 20, and the Empire was collapsing. Ash drifted through the atmosphere like snow, quiet and unassuming, cloaking the ruins of what had once been the Valkyrie Empire's eastern control nexus. It coated the jagged bones of shattered towers and the scorched husks of burned-out armor, reducing symbols of might into the indistinguishable wreckage of defeat. In that silence, with a world between breaths, humanity's most dangerous soldiers walked unopposed. Dorn adjusted the sling on his shoulder, the makeshift bandage around his ribs soaked through. His steps were slow but steady. Every breath was a razor pulled through his chest. Cass walked beside him, silent, bleeding from a graze along her jaw. Rika emerged from the wreckage last, wiping black soot off her visor, her eyes distant as if still seeing the fire. They had done it. The Obsidian Legion had no orders, no chain of command, no empire left to serve. All around the galaxy, tremors rippled outward. Broadcast towers failed to reboot. Prison planets opened their gates in confusion. Subjugated worlds seized opportunity. The once proud Imperial fleet cannibalized itself under fractured protocols and AI rot. The cascade Saint triggered had burrowed deeper than anyone predicted, deeper than it was meant to. The Empire hadn't just been decapitated. It had been hollowed out from the spine. Yet there was no triumph in Dorn's face as he crouched beside the crater where the AI throne had once stood. Just grim resolve. Saint's remains had been unrecoverable. Molecular dissolution when the core ignited. He knew that was how the tech wanted it. No burial, just result. Cass knelt beside him, her voice low. Lang's gone dark. He was supposed to rendezvous 2 hours ago. He's either dead or gone aground, Dorn said. Both mean we leave without him. Do we leave at all? Rika asked, tone flat. We didn't come here to die, Dorn said. But we were supposed to. She didn't say it like a question, just a fact spoken aloud. When Jack died, we knew this was a suicide mission. The goal was just to burn louder than they could ignore. Then we made a mistake, Dorn said, turning his eyes skyward. We were underestimated. In the orbital shadow above them, a Valkyrie dreadnought drifted. It had been isolated from the network, its AI lobotomized and panicked by its own crew to avoid the corruption. For 6 hours it had waited, dark and unresponsive, calculating its last move. The admiral aboard, Karen Soul, watched as comms fell silent sector by sector. His world was collapsing. So he did what Valkyrie doctrine demanded of its officers when absolute control was no longer possible. He authorized planetary sterilization. Missiles bloomed from the ship's underside like cancerous growths, each one encoded with a neural disruptor payload meant to erase not just life, but memory. An entire biosphere reduced to inert dust. The Ghost Vipers didn't know the missiles were coming. But Lang did. Bleeding out beneath a collapsed rail bridge 2 clicks west of the main compound, his legs shattered, he'd rerouted power from a half-buried drone array into his uplink. The signal was weak, burned, but he forced it through. Dorn's comm crackled, barely intelligible. Birds inbound. From orbit. You've got maybe 5 minutes. Big ones. Not the kind you outrun. Cass's jaw tightened. Evac. No birds left in the sky. But I've got something better. Gave those bastards a gift before I bled out. Mark their dreadnought. Feed your last drone. It'll know what to do. Dorn didn't ask questions. He accessed the drone network, locked in Lang's signal path, and fed the beacon into the last working aerial bot. It screamed into the sky. The Valkyrie dreadnought's hull was meters thick, impervious to most munitions. But it had blind spots, engine nacelles meant to cool during orbital descent, rarely armored against precise interior threats. Lang had anticipated that. His beacon guided the drone through atmospheric currents, evading the dreadnought's primitive fallback defenses. When it reached its mark, the payload detonated, not with fire, but with code. Lang's final creation, a living virus made from fragments of Saint's original cascade, tuned to find command centers and rip them apart from within. In 20 seconds, the dreadnought ceased to function. In 25, its fusion core began to melt. In 30, it was gone. Just a falling star. Just another streak of death across the sky. The Vipers watched its remains tumble into the horizon. Dorn exhaled slowly. Lang always hated ships. Rika smiled faintly, eyes wet but defiant. He always hated orders more. They left the compound in silence, moving through the carcass of a world that no longer belonged to anyone. Communications from the Resistance flooded their devices. Every known rebel cell, now coordinating in a way the Valkyrie hadn't anticipated. The Ghost Vipers hadn't just struck back. They had turned the galaxy on its head. But victory was a word for politicians. For them, there were only the next steps. Cass stopped as they crested a hill and looked back. The second tower was gone, flattened. Valkyrie patrols were abandoning their posts. No more orbitals. No more broadcasts. And yet, in the wreckage, something had changed. Something irreversible. They'll never forget what happened here, she said quietly. Not just here, Dorn replied. Everywhere. He tapped his comm, global transmission. Burn all the encryption. Let them hear. He spoke into the wind. This is for Jack Rains. Navy SEAL. Human. Executed live for the galaxy to see. The Empire thought that would break us. That we'd fall in line. But humans don't break the way you expect. He paused. You taught U.S. war. You showed us cruelty. But you forgot the part of us that watches. That adapts. That endures. Now you remember. He killed the transmission. The comms erupted instantly with voices. Cheering. Crying. Resistance leaders across dozens of worlds hailed them as liberators, as ghosts from Earth's past reborn, to finish a war humanity never started, but would end. Dorn holstered his weapon. Time to disappear. They moved into the smoke and rubble, unseen, unnoticed, unforgettable. And somewhere deep in the stars, new empires took note. The message had spread. You do not kill a human hero and expect silence. You do not provoke Earth and expect mercy. Because after 20 minutes, even a galactic empire can fall. And the Ghost Vipers, they were only just getting started.